The president of Serbia 2 weeks ago said, in the next 3 or 4 months, we're going to have a world war. Now, to the extent that he's a leader of a country in Europe, okay, he talks to the other people in Europe. How credible is he? And I would say he's fairly credible. I believe we're facing a financial catastrophe. And we've got so many things. Before you started recording, we were talking about there are so many things going on right now that are dangerous. And one little spark is going to ignite a bonfire. I think that the metals are reflecting inflation and demand, because I think the demand is coming from China. If we can avoid blowing up the world, the junior resource market's going up 5 to 10-fold.
Bob Moriarty, sir, thank you so much for coming on Capital Cosm.
It's a real pleasure, and I've looked at some of your videos, and you've done some great videos.
Well, coming from you, that means a lot. So, Bob, for those who may not know who you are, this is your maiden voyage. It's customary for me on this podcast, this show, to ask you, who are you? Introduce yourself to the audience. What got you into, gold and silver, investing, everything that Bob Moriarty is?
Okay, well, I'll take you back literally 60 years. I joined the Marine Corps a week after I turned 18 in 1964. And I went through boot camp. I managed to get into flight training. I got my wings when I was 20. I was an F-4 pilot when I was 20. I spent 20 months in Vietnam. I flew 834 missions. So that made me extremely anti-war. I saw what a waste of time and money it was. Strange enough, that's what got me into gold. Now, to take you back then and to give you an idea, we used two kinds of fuel in the F-4. We used JP4 and we used JP5. And they're both kerosenes, but JP5 was a denser kerosene. And we tracked everything financially. JP4 cost 2 cents a gallon. JP5, because it was denser, cost 3 cents a gallon. A 500-pound bomb cost about $500. 500-pound napalm cost about $400. CBUs cost about $50,000. So we tracked everything. And I watched this for over a year. And I said, this is a really expensive war. And I realized all wars are expensive. So gold was $35 an ounce. And after I had flown combat for a year, I get transferred to Da Nang. And I was flying VIPs around. And I used to go to Thailand 1 or 2 times a week. And you could buy gold in Thailand for $35, $38 an ounce. And I thought, if we're not paying for this war, at some point it has to be negative on the dollar. And of course, the dollar was king back then. And as it turns out, I was right. I was just a little early. So I'm not a diehard gold bug who worships at the altar of gold, but I can see how important it is to have a stable currency. When I went into the Marine Corps, I was getting paid $75 a month as a boot. When I was a captain in the Marine Corps with over 4 years as a pilot, I was getting, I think, $1,100 a month. I think boots now get something like $18,000 a year, and the similar rank captain over 4 or captain over 6, who's an aviator, it's probably $50,000 or $60,000. And nobody wants to admit this. Nobody talks about this, but 100% of inflation is generated by the government. And they don't want to admit that, but but they just print and print and print. Some of the things now I have read and seen, we are increasing the debt. We are spending $1 trillion every 100 days. And I'm sitting here saying, I spend 6 or 8 hours a day at my computer. I don't know where the money's going. And nobody I follow knows where the money's going. But the debt is just exploding. And that cannot be a good thing.
Yeah, it seems like it's a free for all in the public sector. It's just everyone's just trying to get their bag.
Well, it's the last thing that happens when an empire collapses is the government raids the treasury, and I think that's exactly what this is.
Yeah. Well, let's just dive right into it, Bob. What are you seeing in terms of broad strokes out there in the economy? What is your 30,000-foot view as an ex-fighter pilot? What do you see in terms of generally speaking in the economy?
If you look at the numbers, if you look at the debt, you look at the interest rates, you look at the breadth of shares trading, if you look at things like Nvidia, what you have is a market that is as extreme or more extreme than it was in 1929. If you take the breadth, if you go back to March of 2000, when the market topped last time, you had 18% of the entire stock market was in 5 stocks. Today, if you take the top 5 stocks, you've got 27% of the entire stock market.
Wow.
And the stock market tends to be self-correcting. It goes up and it goes down. It goes from one extreme to the other extreme. And we are at an extreme now. And the next big move is going to be down, and it's going to be catastrophic. And the smartest people I know are all saying exactly the same thing.
What do you say to people who say that we've been hearing about this debt crisis for a while? We've been hearing about this market crash for a number of years, but it's yet to materialize. Why is the imminency of it this time any different?
Because of the degree of sentiment being at an incredible extent. Nvidia hit a peak, I think 2 weeks ago exactly. I think it was on Thursday the 20th. And it got up to 141. And then it dropped from 141 to 117. And the real key, and nobody other than me has mentioned it, there are 24 billion shares of the stock. So if you take the decline from 141 to 117, 14 points times 24 billion, you get about $580 billion in losses. And that's real money, okay? If you go back to the 20th of June, okay, people had all this money, $3.3 trillion in one stock. And if you go 4 days later, it had dropped $580 billion. Now, that was real money. It was in people's account. They believed they could spend it. And 4 days later, it went to money heaven. Now, it's correcting now, okay? It dropped 18%, and it's climbing back up now. It may even touch the top, but the next major move in that stock and in the tech stocks is going to be down. You can't have Apple and Microsoft and Nvidia be in the entire market.
Right. So what should be on the radar screen for the average retail investor, do you think?
World War III.
Yeah, so let's just dive right into that.
Well, strange enough, I mean, that's a good question. We're caught in this dichotomy right now because we talk about what should we be investing in now. And I hope we avoid World War III. I just don't see any way it's going to happen. So we can pretend that the stock market is the biggest danger facing people, but I don't think that's necessarily true.
Yes. So in investing, we deal with probabilities, right? We have no certainties that we play with. So in terms of probabilities, do you see the probability of World War III being higher than not? Is that kind of your base case?
Yeah, it goes higher every day. We actually are facing 5.5 wars right now.
Okay.
And I'm seeing things that are so terrifying. I'm asking myself, are people really that stupid? Are they really doing that? The Minister for National Security of Israel just came out 2 days ago and said every Palestinian prisoner should be taken out, shot in the head. And I'm going, wait a minute. Okay, that is so bizarre. Now, I don't care anything about the religious issue. I don't care about the conflict between Israel and Hezbollah, or Israel and Hamas, or Israel and Iran. Anybody who says, I think blacks should be taken out, shot in the head, is sick. If somebody says, I think whites should be taken out and shot in the head, they're sick. If somebody said Palestinians should be taken out, shot in the head, they're war criminals. And nobody says anything. And we're at more of a dangerous point in world history than we have ever been, and nobody's protesting. Okay. The president of Serbia 2 weeks ago said, in the next 3 or 4 months, we're going to have a world war. Now, to the extent that he's a leader of a country in Europe, okay, he talks to the other people in Europe. How credible is he? And I would say he's fairly credible. If you take the Director General of the UN, is that his title? I'm not sure.
I think so.
But the head of the UN,
Right.
Guterres, says, now the head of the UN says that we're at the most critical stage in world history. We're facing catastrophe, and we're absolutely facing catastrophe. Okay. We've got NATO has forces on the Belarus border. Okay. That's dangerous. Russia has defeated Ukraine, but NATO and the United States don't want to admit that. NATO and the US are attacking children on beaches in Russia, and that's a really bad idea. Iran fires a bunch of rockets and missiles into Israel and totally shifts the balance of power. Hezbollah has the ability to destroy Israel in a day. And nobody's talking peace except the really bad guys like Lavrov and the Chinese, and saying we need to stop this war. Hezbollah and the Houthis, both of whom are going to win and are winning, have said, look, that's really simple. We want the genocide in Gaza stopped. And because Bibi Netanyahu is facing charges for corruption, and he knows he's guilty, and he knows he's going to be found guilty, he keeps extending the war so he can stay out of jail. And nobody said anything about it. One of the reasons Joe Biden is being reluctant to give up the presidency when he's clearly not qualified, and everybody knows that, is that he could be facing criminal charges. And when he steps down, we're going to find out that there was a side deal that he will be given a pardon by whatever Democrat idiot takes over for him.
So you mentioned 5.5 wars ongoing right now. You did mention the Middle East war with Israel and Hezbollah. You did mention Russia and NATO, but what are the other 3.5 wars that you alluded to?
Okay, we've got Hamas versus Israel in Gaza. We've got Hezbollah in Israel on the Lebanon border. We've got Ukraine versus Russia in Ukraine. We've got NATO versus Belarus, okay, north of Ukraine. And we've got Taiwan versus China.
Gotcha. What
We're
do you make of that
going,
visit from Putin to the leader of North Korea, a couple of weeks ago?
it's interesting. And of course, the American take is that this nasty bad guy thug, Putin, meets with this nasty bad guy thug in North Korea, when in fact, what the United States has done with all their sanctions is he's driven all these countries together. Now, I was in a war and I spent 20 months there and I did a lot of combat. I'm going to flat tell you, nobody is going to defeat China and Russia and North Korea and Iran together. Nobody. It isn't going to happen. And instead of talking peace, instead of saying, hey, we need to get along with people, we're saying we need to draft people. The Germans are talking about a draft. The Americans are talking about a draft. The Brits are talking about a draft. If the war goes nuclear, it will last for 72 minutes.
Do the nukes come last, just like they did in World War II? Or do we kick things off with the nukes, do you think?
We're at war now. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Lavrov has come out and said that there is no longer a condition of peace between the United States and Russia. And when you don't have peace, it means you have war. Some of the things like aiming American cluster munitions against beaches with children on a holiday is so evil that it has pissed everybody in Russia off. And I can safely assume, because I would be recommending the same thing if I was general, Putin's generals are saying, look, these guys are going to push and push and push and push. Nobody's talking about negotiations. Nobody's talking about peace. They're talking about more and more war. Why don't we just get it over with? And the indication of NATO forces on the Belarus border is exceptionally dangerous. Nobody's talking about it. I mean, it's something you got to look hard to find out. But some of the things the rebels in Yemen have stopped Israel's economy, period. Stopped it. They've sunk 2 ships, and now they have hypersonic missiles that there's no protection against. The United States is actually shipping vessels over to the Eastern Mediterranean. What they don't understand is those vessels could easily be sunk by the Hutus.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and pivot over to the dollar, if you don't mind. Kind of similar, but let's also stay in the geopolitical sphere as well. What do you see happening out there with the de-dollarization story right now between the BRICS alliance and versus the West? How far into the tooth are we into de-dollarization? Does King Dollar still have a lot of room to run, much the same way that the British sterling did? It took about a couple of decades to unwind their reserve status. Where are we at in de-dollarization, do you think? And how does the BRICS fall into it?
You just made a really good analogy, because the analogy between the pound sterling and the dollar is very valid. The dollar is not going to disappear. The dollar is not going to go to zero. Okay, we could have hyperinflation. Okay, we could have a substantially reduced value of the dollar, but the dollar is going to be trading 5 years from now at $10 or 10 years from now, regardless of the value. And again, this is not something that Russia and China and India have done to the U.S. It's something the U.S. has done to itself. It's committed suicide. When the sanctions were put on Russia in February 2022, the United States and Europe seized $300 billion of Russian assets, including a lot of treasuries and government bonds. That was stealing. Now Europe has said, well, we're just holding those for the Russians. When we break Russia apart, okay, we'll give them their money back, which is kind of a bizarre thing to say. But since there is interest on the money, we'll take the $50 billion a year in interest and we'll give it to Ukraine. Well, the Russians understand that whether they're stealing the principal, which is 300 billion, or the interest, which is 50 billion, stealing is stealing. So what the United States and Europe has done is said, if you trust us and you put your money where we can get our hands on it, if we don't like it, we're going to steal your money. And if you think about it, that's a real bad idea. And what everybody's going to say, I'm not going to put my money where you can get your hands on it. I'm going to take my money away from you. It's even gotten to the point where minuscule little African countries are going to the United States and going to the UK and say, oh, by the way, we want our 50 ounces of gold back, okay, because we don't trust you anymore. So what the United States and NATO are doing are committing financial suicide by doing this. Now, a Japanese bank has just said that they're going to sell, I think it's $53 billion in treasuries between now and next March. And they're not all U.S. treasuries. But what Japan has said is, look, our financial situation is so precarious because interest rates have gone up so much that we're going to have to sell our assets. So there's a lot of attacks on the dollar, but they're attacks that were not caused by Japan or China or Russia or North Korea. They're attacks that were caused by the United States and Europe. It's foolish to an extreme because as the US dollar loses its value, inflation in the United States is going to go through the roof. Now, it's already gone through the roof in Europe. And if you look around a little bit, there's a few sites you can go to where somebody had an account at Costco, and there was something they bought 2 years ago, and they spent $125 for, and now it costs $305. So there's inflation going on that nobody wants to admit, and that's an indirect way of hurting the dollar. And that you've got this self-induced suicide by stealing. The United States keeps doing things that they would never allow anybody else to do. But they think, well, if we steal, it's okay. But it's not okay with the Russians. It's not okay. I think there's 40 nations that the United States has sanctions against. You've got Cuba, you've got Venezuela, you've got China, you've got North Korea, you've got Russia, you've got Belarus. And the sanctions don't work in the first place, but they do send a clear and convincing message to your enemy.
What about gold, the gold price? Has the gold price kind of reflected the happenings going on around the world, given the geopolitical uncertainty, the BRICS alliance forming over the last decade? Is 2,300 and some odd change gold? Is that a fair price at the moment, or are we? Is the gold price looking to move up even higher?
My belief, and it's just my opinion, that lots of people like to predict the price of gold. And I don't even try doing that because I'm not smart enough. But certainly $2,300 gold, gold got as high as $2,450. And that certainly reflects the uncertainty geopolitically and financially in the world. What's interesting to me is silver hasn't moved that much, but there's been a shift in the center of gravity, and it's no longer the West that controls the price of gold and silver. The price of gold and silver is now set in Shanghai, and the Chinese control it. Now, let me read something to you. There's a piece that I'm going to post tomorrow, and it's a scary piece. Okay, let's see here.
Yeah, let me know if you want to share your screen, by the way.
I'm not smart enough to do that. Okay, let's see here. Chinese government bonds are on fire. That's raising alarm bells in Beijing. And that article, believe it or not, came from CNN. I don't look to CNN for investment advice. But what's happening basically is because of the geopolitical crap going on, and because of the change in the value of the dollar, and because of the total crash of real estate in China, you have this mad rush for government bonds in China. Humans are animals, okay? And they react the same way birds do and fish do and gazelles in Africa. They want to be part of the herd. And the Chinese are no better or no worse than Americans or Brits or anybody else. And now they're rushing into bonds. And every time the mob makes a big run like that, it ends in disaster. However, at some point in time, they're going to do that to gold, and they're going to do that to silver. Now, I was in gold and silver. I was buying gold as early as 1968. And in January of 1980, I looked around and all these people that I had been telling to buy gold and silver for years, all of a sudden were telling me, hey, Bob, what you got to do is you got to put as much money into gold and silver as you can. And I thought, wait a minute, where were you when the silver was $1.29 an ounce? Where were you when gold was $35? And they wanted to buy gold when it was $8.75. They wanted to buy silver when it was $50.25. So I sold all my gold and silver in January of 1980 because the sentiment scared me. The sentiment on Chinese bonds now absolutely petrifies me. I believe, and again, this is not, I did not come down the mountain with Moses. It's not written on a stone. I believe we're facing a financial catastrophe. And we've got so many things. Before you started recording, we were talking about, there are so many things going on right now that are dangerous. And one little spark is going to ignite a bonfire.
Yeah, it's certainly. Hey guys, quick pause. Looking for the best gold and silver prices out there? Well, I have scoured all throughout the internet trying to find you guys the best prices, and Miles Franklin does it for me. In my opinion, I haven't really been able to find anything else that compares to their prices. You really don't want to. What you really want to do, however, is you want to email them at info@milesfranklin.com, and you want to say that Capital Cosm sent me in the subject line, because if you do that, you'll get their special pricing guide. That's some of the most competitive pricing out there. No commitment necessary. Info@milesfranklin.com, and Capital Cosm sent me in the subject line. And now let's get back to the video. When you look at the world as a whole, where do you see this a spark kind of taking off? Is it NATO? Is it NATO Russia? Is it the Middle East? What kind of has the most urgency in your eyes at the moment?
Well, strange enough, you're taking a very traditional approach. Are you familiar with the butterfly effect?
I am.
Okay, the butterfly effect in essence says that if a butterfly flaps its wings in Venezuela, that can cause a tornado in Texas.
Right.
And that sounds a little esoteric, but I would highly suggest your listeners look it up and read about the butterfly effect, because the butterfly effect is very real. Now, the problem with it is you can't look for a specific spark that causes a bonfire, but it doesn't make any difference. If the bonfire is prepared and it's got enough fuel and it's ready to go, all it takes is a little spark, and it could be a butterfly in Venezuela. When an avalanche starts, the conditions are absolutely obvious to the people who track that stuff, and every avalanche starts with one snowflake. So your question was which snowflake, and my answer is doesn't make any difference.
Yeah, it's an inevitable thing. You have this election happening in November here in the United States between Trump.
What? Who said there was going to be an election? We're not going
Well,
to have an election.
assuming there is, right? Assuming there is.
Maybe. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Let's
yeah.
let's let's just play a little thought experiment. Let's assume that there is an election and it's Trump versus Biden or Trump versus whoever the Democrats put up if they replace Biden. Is there any material difference a Trump presidency or presidency part two could make to kind of quelling some of the tensions in, let's say, Ukraine and Russia, or elsewhere in the world, or is it pretty much set in stone? Has the cake been baked?
I don't see any leadership in the United States. I do not see any wise leadership. I don't see anyone saying, it'd be a good idea if we stopped shipping 2,000-pound bombs to Israel. They've shipped 14,000, 2,000 bombs to Israel. Now, what the fuck did they think Israel was going to do with them? So Biden talks about, Israel, you shouldn't commit genocide, but supplies munitions. I don't see any significant difference between the Democrats and the Republicans. I think it's one snake with two heads. However, is that a giant black swan? And my answer would be absolutely yes. And I think the real danger is not whether there's an election, it's not who gets elected. I think the real danger is a potential civil war. It's obvious by now the Democrats have lied, cheated, and stolen all the way going back to the 2020 election. And they are literally coming out now saying, well, the Supreme Court has said the president has papal dispensation and he can do anything he wants as long as it's an official order. So why don't we kill Trump? I'm going, what? Okay. I saw Kennedy the night before he was killed. I would say, let me think. I was a 16-year-old kid in Fort Worth, Texas, and he flew into Carswell Air Force Base, and there were about 10 limousines, and they took him in downtown Fort Worth for the night. And he got up the next day and flew to Dallas and was killed. There was a point that I was going to make there, and I get so caught up listening to myself, I forget. What were we talking about?
Any differences between Trump and Biden with regards to geopolitics?
I believe, though I can't prove it, the CIA and Lyndon Johnson and the oil oligarchs in Texas murdered John F. Kennedy. But back then, when the CIA whacked presidents, they were at least quiet about it. Okay, now we've got a situation where we've got congressmen saying, hey, I've got an idea. Why don't we go whack Trump? Wait a minute. This is insane. Okay, how far overboard have you gone when you start talking about it? I've got an idea. Why don't we go kill our political opponent? Now, if they're talking about it in public, are they talking about it even more at private? Yeah. Okay. The CIA has killed lots of people who were perceived as enemies of the United States. So there's lots of people in the United States now trying to define Trump as a public enemy of the United States. And of course, do you know what it is that Trump has done that has him so angry?
He's an outsider?
No.
Um,
Trump has threatened to do the same thing to the Democrats that the Democrats did to him. Now, to me, turnabout, it's fair play. Okay, I would totally support that. I think it's a great idea. But he has threatened to do what they did to him. And I can't remember who it was. I think it was James Comey was on television. And he said, Trump is a threat to democracy in the United States. He's threatening to go after the legal system. Well, yeah, okay. But Jesus, Kobe, you were part of the cover-up of the Hunter Biden laptop. You were part of the Russiagate nonsense. You were part of that whole thing that was set up by Barack Obama. And these people were all participants in the White House. Okay, and all this stuff is coming out now. James Clapper, okay, who James Clapper was the guy who got the 51 intelligence professionals to sign a document that 51 of them knew was a lie. That's, the issue shouldn't be who's going to be president of the United States. The issue shouldn't be, are we going to have an election? The issue should be, okay, when we choose up sides for the Civil War, what side do I get to be on?
Right. Do you think that the activist wing of the Democratic Party that would engage in kinetic combat, because it's not going to be like the donor class or like the managerial class, it's going to be like the cast of characters we saw in the summer of 2020. They seem to hate the Democrats probably even more than the Republicans now, given what they've enabled in Gaza. Do you think that the activist wing of the Democratic Party will actually fight for the Democrats, though, considering how much they actually hate Biden now?
Well, you just used the right word. And I'm really glad you threw that word in because it's the key word. There is so much hate now. That's what's going to ignite the Civil War. If Biden doesn't step down literally in the next day or two, the Democrat Party is going to get torn apart with everybody trying to steal the last of the money. We got BLM hates the whites. You've got Gavin Newsom saying if you steal less than $1,000, it's not really stealing. Got the people in Portland who have woken up to the fact that, by the way, giving people drugs creates a really bad situation. The United States has lost its way. And I'm going to suggest something that I don't think anyone else is suggesting. I'm not telling you I'm right. I'm just telling you I got this opinion. When you do not have honest money, you do not have an honest economy. And it should be obvious to anyone now that we have lost our way. We're on the wrong path. We're headed to perdition, and we could easily be headed to World War III, and it's foolish. Now, this is all predicted in the fourth turning, and I would highly encourage people to read that. But I believe that literally when Nixon took us off the gold standard in August 15th of 1971, he set up this situation where Congress was given an American Express Platinum card and said, you don't ever have to pay your bills. Well, you do have to pay your bills, okay? And we're in far more debt in the world that can ever be repaid. We need to reset the entire world economy. We need to regain our values. A 6'3" male swimmer who is mediocre thinks about it, says, I could beat most of those women. So he puts on a women's swimsuit and says, okay, I woke up this morning and I feel like a girl. And he goes out there and he wins all these competitions against girls. And all these women who have practiced for 5 or 10 or 15 years to be good at a sport are getting beat by somebody who's 6'3", gone through puberty. He's got a dick, he's got a balls. And the only thing female about him is the swimsuit. And I'm thinking, do these people not have any honor? Don't they have any respect for other people? If I wake up in the morning and I feel like a giraffe, it's probably because I had too much to drink the night before. Waking up and thinking you're a giraffe does not make you a giraffe. It makes you a guy with a hangover.
Yeah, they've reduced the concept of women to just a costume, essentially, as to whether or not you're wearing a dress or not.
That is really good. I like that. I'm going to steal that. somebody has come out with a study, literally, we posted it in the last week, about the brains of women and the brains of men, and they concluded that women's brains are different than men's brains. And we know that's true intuitively, but women are literally wired differently than men. But the interesting part of the study to me was that when a male puts on a dress and pretends he's a female, okay, we used to call them transvestites. Now they call them something else. They're transvestites. The brain doesn't change. Okay, if they're born a male, they still have the brain of a male, even if they're wearing a dress. And I found that very interesting. But of course, if you say men and women are different, you get attacked. One of the finest writers in England came out and said men and women are different. There's two sexes. And actors that she had put millions of dollars into their pockets immediately turned around and attacked her. What is wrong with having an opinion? The opinion doesn't have to be right. I got lots of opinions, okay? But that doesn't mean my opinions are right. But I've still got the right to an opinion. And now you no longer have a right to opinion. Now you have to believe what the herd tells you to believe. And I'll be candid, putting on a dress doesn't make you a woman.
Yeah. So, Bob, let's go ahead and take it back to the economy for a second. You mentioned all this craziness happening in the world. An indicator for chaos traditionally has been the oil price and the gold price. Now, the gold price we've seen make new all-time highs as of recently, as of a couple of months ago. The oil price seems to be lagging a bit behind. Why is the oil price at this price range of about $70 to $80? Been kind of stuck here for several months to a year now. Given everything that's going on, shouldn't the oil price be a lot higher?
Well, in theory, I would have to say absolutely yes. The Iranians could shut the Gulf of Hormuz in one day. Okay. The Hutus have dramatically increased the price of shipping and the price of oil. We could be in World War III in a week or two, but if you look at the oil price saying, nah, it's just normal stuff. You're talking about gold. And I actually have a decent sized piece of a big silver lead zinc mine in Bolivia. And to give you an idea of how base metals have changed, zinc has gone from $1.09 a pound to $1.33 a pound in about 3 or 4 months. So gold is not the only thing that has shot up. Now, silver has gone from $21 to $32 in the same time frame as gold. I think that the metals are reflecting inflation and demand, because I think the demand is coming from China. But I'm totally confused. If you asked me 6 months ago, all of these things are going to happen geopolitically, and we're going to have 5.5 potential wars, what's going to happen to the price of oil? I'd tell you, oil is going to be $150 a barrel, and it's not. So I'm going to tell you that's something that, while I have an opinion, my opinion is wrong. Okay, oil should be higher, but it's not.
Okay. So, Bob, what we've been doing on this show lately is we've opened the lines to you guys, the guests, to ask a question to my next guest. So if there's a question you can ask my next guest, what would it be? And FYI, my next guest is Doomberg.
Oh, I love him.
Yeah. Well, the floor is yours.
Yeah,
What do you got to ask?
he is so good. Here's what I'm going to say. I'm not smart enough to go one-on-one with Doomberg. Doomberg is simply brilliant. And rather than me introduce something to confuse him, what I want him to do is to talk. Okay. Uh, I'll give you a compliment. I had not come across you before. The only thing that is going to save the world, potentially, is the alternative media. And you've got people like Doomberg, like QTR, like you, and like a dozen other sites that I do interviews on that are giving an alternative point of view. Now, I'm not saying I am correct, but I've got an alternative point of view, and it's something that should be considered. The mainstream media lies about everything. And now we know they lie about everything. So you should do two things. One is you should listen to them carefully, and you should understand that they're always lying. So whatever it tells you is wrong. They're still touting the COVID nonsense, and COVID's killed about 25 million people. The alternative media, and you get guys like Doomberg. I'm going to tell you, he's right up there. He may not be the very top guy, but I don't know who the top guy is. I don't know anybody that's smarter than him, and it's certainly not me.
Is there a question you want to ask him, though?
Nope. I want him to talk, and I don't give a damn what he talks about. I'm going to listen.
Okay. All right. Well, I have a question from Josh Young. He was my previous guest. Do you know who he is?
Nope.
All right. Well, anyways, he has a question for you. So he says,
I'm interested in where other people are finding opportunity in the market. I think it's really interesting. I think it's a really helpful view into their view on the economy, their view on valuations, and their view on sort of where things are going rather than just sort of where they are.
Well, strange enough, I think silver. Okay. Silver is the most volatile metal by far, and sentiment affects it the most. There have been 60 billion ounces of silver produced, and people have been saying for 20 years that we're about to run out of silver. Now, while a lot of silver used to get recycled, a lot of silver doesn't get recycled anymore. One of these days, we're going to run short of silver, and silver really is going to go to the moon. I'm shocked that we've got $2,300 gold, $32 silver, because silver was $50.25 44 years ago. So I think the single best investment is silver. But if you're talking about shares, I think the junior resource market is the cheapest it's ever been in history. And if we can avoid blowing up the world, the junior resource market's going up 5 to 10-fold.
Wow, 5 to 10-fold from current level, which has already moved a substantial bit. Another question that I ask my guests on this show, Bob, is any books that you would recommend the audience look into? You've already recommended The Fourth Turning, but anything else you want to put forward?
Yeah. All I have to do is go to Amazon and put in my name. And again, because I'm so modest, that's because I was a fighter pilot. I have probably the broadest range of writing of anyone that I've ever seen. There are lots of people who are better writers than me. However, I've written about war. I've written about ferrying small airplanes all over the world. I've written about finance. I've written about investing in junior resource companies. I've written about following a gold story right to production. And I've written a couple of very funny fiction novels. So you can go to Amazon and you can look at the books that I've written. I don't care what kind of books you like to read. There will be something that you can read that you'll enjoy. But one of the provisos that I say, and I told a friend of mine this a couple of days ago, when you're reading my books, do not drink coffee or Coca-Cola.
Okay.
Because if you do, you are going to snort into your coffee cup. I am not only handsome and witty, I am a very funny writer. And I can pick up my books and flip through the books. And of course, the older you get, the worse your memory gets. And I'm reading this book thinking, damn, this guy's a really good writer. And I will start snorting because it's so funny.
Well,
But
that should be a disclaimer on the front page then.
yeah, it really should be. But I'm trying to sell books. So if they ruin the book because they snort their coffee onto the book, they got to go buy another book.
All right. Well, you guys heard it here first. If you want to check out any of Bob's books, you don't stay away from the caffeine. Stay away from the
No,
caffeine.
it's not the caffeine. It's the drink. They could do.
Oh, yeah, the drink. My apologies.
Or water or anything else because they could be, drinking the coffee, trying to read at the same time.
Yeah. So we'll try and get all those books in the links in the description down below, guys. So if you want to check out Bob's books, we'll try and get all those books in the description down below. All right, Bob, this has been a great pleasure. Any concluding thoughts before we wrap up? And also drop us where people can find you.
Well, I just want to say you've really hurt my feelings.
Oh, I did?
Yeah. Because Doomberg is so much better than I am that when people listen to him, they are going to totally ignore me. So he's going to have 87,000 million views, and I'm going to have 3.
Well, guys, be sure to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Let's boost this video up in the algorithm so Bob gets more than 3 views, and so we can kind of compete there with Doomberg. But Bob, where can people find you?
Well, I've got 2 websites, 321 Gold and 321 Energy, and they're both good websites. And what I try to do is present all reasonable arguments. I don't talk about cryptocurrencies because I don't like them. I don't talk about manipulation conspiracy theories because I don't like them. But I am trying to give my readers a fair shake on the economy, on war. I post 1 or 2 pieces a week, and it's kind of a Wall Street Journal for resource investors. But the opportunity in the resource investing field right now is extraordinary.
So aside from silver, do you see any other big plays, big opportunities forming?
Strangely enough, the junior resources, I see a lot of stocks under a dime, okay, that I know are going up tenfold. Some of the highest quality, best run mining companies in Canada are selling for peanuts, and that's not going to last. We're going to have a rush into gold and silver and into resource stocks similar to the tech stocks, similar to the cryptocurrencies, similar to what the Chinese did in both real estate and now in government bonds. The time is coming for gold and silver because, quite bluntly, if you don't have honest money, you don't have an honest economy. And when enough people wake up to that fact, money is going to flow into resources. In 1929, 28 or 29% of money in stocks was in mining companies. It's 1/2 of 1% now. In 1980, it was 8 or 9%. So the money that's going to flow into resources, into gold and silver, is going to be unimaginable. And it's going to top. There will come a time to sell.
What about the mining stocks? Do you look at the mining stocks at all, or just physical gold and silver?
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, okay. Gotcha. Great. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Bob. This has been a pleasure. Guys, please hit that like button. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't. It goes a long way, and it's free. It doesn't cost you a thing. As always, it's been a pleasure, and I will catch you in the next episode. Bye, y'all.